Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I am going to start Unit 3 of Class 8, that is ruling the countryside. So let's back to the 12th August 1765. On that day, the Mughal Emperor officially made the East India Company the Diwan of Bengal. That means the company became the chief financial authority of Bengal. This event probably happened inside Robert Clive's tent, not in a palace. But later, British painters showed it as a grand royal moment because for them it was a symbol of power and pride. Now, becoming Diwan meant the company wasn't just a trading group anymore. It had to manage land, collect revenue, and control administration. But remember, the company was still a foreign power, so it had to act carefully. They couldn't completely remove Indian rurals or landlords who had local influence. Instead, the company tried to control them, not eliminate them. So this chapter is all about how the company colonized the countryside and organized revenue and changed people's land rights and forced farmers to grow crops it wanted. So all for British profit. Now revenue for the company. Now that the company became Diwan, it started thinking like a businessman, not a ruler. Its main goal was to earn more revenue and buy Indian goods like silk and cotton cheaply. Earlier, the company used to bring gold and silver from Britain to buy Indian goods. But after 1765, it started using Bengal's tax money, the revenue collected from Indians, to buy goods for export. So in short, Indians were funding British trade. But soon, Bengal's economy began to collapse. The artisans were forced to sell their goods at very low prices, so they left their villages. The farmers couldn't pay heavy taxes. Agriculture started declining. And in 1770, Bengal faced a terrible famine. Nearly one-third of population died. The British realized if agriculture collapses, their revenue will also stop. After this crisis, the company understood that if they wanted steady income, they had to improve agriculture. So after almost 20 years of debate, they introduced a new system in 1793 called a permanent settlement. In this system, the Rajas and Talukdars were made zamindars. They had to collect rent from peasants and pay a fixed amount of revenue to the company every year. This revenue amount was permanently fixed, never to be increased again. The logic was, if zamindars knew their payment would never increase, they will feel secure, invest in the land and improve cultivation. And if the production increased, they will earn more profit while the company continued getting regular revenue. Sounds smart, right? But in reality, it didn't work that way. The problem is, the permanent settlement turned into a big failure. Why? Because the revenue fixed was too high and many zamindars couldn't pay it. Their land were taken away and sold at auctions. Those who kept their lands didn't care to improve agriculture. They simply collected rent from tenants and enjoyed their earnings. By the early 18th, when crops prices rose, the zamindars earned more profit. But the companies got no extra revenue since the rate was fixed forever. Meanwhile, the peasants suffered the most. They had to pay very high rent to zamindars. And if they failed, they lost their land. And many took loans from the moneylenders and fell into a cycle of debt. So instead of prosperity, this system caused poverty and exploitation. Next, a new system is devised. Seeing these problems, some company officials wanted change again. In 1822, Holt Mackenzie introduced a new method, that is Mahalwari settlement, mainly in the North India, that is today's Uttar Pradesh region. He believed that the village, means Mahal, was the real social unit of Indian life. So under this system, British collectors measured each village's land and studied its customs. And also, the total revenue of the village was calculated, like not fixed forever but revised periodically. The village headman collected the revenue, in here not the zamindars. Okay? This was seen as a more flexible and community-based model, but still it was a design to benefit the company, not the cultivators. Next one is Monroe system. In southern India, there were no big zamindars. So Captain Alexander Reed and later Thomas Monroe introduced a new system, that is Rotwari system. Here the settlement was made directly with the cultivators. The Riot had to pay tax directly to the company and the land was measured carefully before deciding the tax. And Monroe imagined the British as father figures who would protect the poor riots. But again, reality was different. All was not well. Soon it became clear that even this new system were not working. The revenue officers became greedy and fixed very high taxes. Peasants couldn't pay and many abandoned their villages. Officials had hoped this system would make Indian farmers rich and progressive, but instead villages turned poor and empty. So while the British thought they were modernizing agriculture, they were actually destroying rural India's balance. Next, crops for Europe. Now the company realized India's land could give them more than revenue. It could also supply raw materials for Europe's industries. So they began to push Indian farmers to grow cash crops needed in Europe like indigo, opium, jute, tea, sugarcane, cotton, wheat and rice. Each region was forced to grow what the British wanted, and that's how India's agriculture was completely reshaped, not for Indian needs but for European markets. Now let's focus on one such crop, indigo, the famous blue dye. Does color have a history? Yes, the blue color used in Europe clothes actually came from Indian indigo plants. In earlier times, Europe used another plant called oat to make blue dye, but it gave only dull colors. Indigo from India gave a deep, rich blue, so it became very popular. By the 17th century, European producers started growing indigo in their colonies like Jamaica, Brazil, and Venezuela. But by the late 18th century, demand shot up again, and especially in Britain after the Industrial Revolution. So now British turned to India, its colony, for indigo. From the late 17th, indigo cultivations in Bengal grew rapidly. By 1810, 95% of Britain's indigo came from India. Many British officials left their government jobs to become indigo planters, hoping to making big profit. Even new British businessmen came to India, took loans and entered the indigo business. But how did they actually produce indigo? There were two main systems of indigo cultivation, that is niche system and roti system. The first one is niche cultivation. In the niche system, the planters grew indigo on land they directly controlled. They bought or rented the land and employed laborers. But this system had big problems. The first one, the indigo needed fertile land, and such lands were already full of farmers growing rice. And also, planters couldn't find large blocks of empty land. And they also needed lots of plows and bullocks. About 2 plows for every biga of indigo land. So niche cultivation became too costly and limited. Only less than 25% of total indigo land was under niche cultivation. Rest was under the roti system. And this is where the real exploitation began. The planters made peasants sign a contract or satta. They gave them cash advance at a low interest and forced them to grow indigo on at least 25% of their land. The planters gave seeds and equipment, but farmers had to do all the work. After harvest, the Riot handed over the crop and took another loan, and the cycle of debt and exploitation continued. The worst, the indigo was grown on the best soils where farmers preferred to grow rice. Indigo also exhausted the soil, making it infertile for future crops, so peasants slowly became desperate and angry. Finally, in 1859, Bengal's riots had enough. Thousands of peasants refused to grow indigo. This is called a Blue Rebellion. They attacked indigo factories and refused to pay rents, and even women joined the protest with kitchen tools. The planters' agents were beaten and socially boycotted. This time, peasants were confident because zamindars and village leaders supported them. Even local officials seemed sympathetic. When British magistrate Ashley Aiden announced that riots couldn't be forced to grow indigo, peasants thought even Queen Victoria supported them. That gave them more courage. Writers and intellectuals from Calcutta also came forward, exposing the cruelty of the planters in newspapers and pamphlets. The government panicked and set up the Indigo Commission in 1860. The commission found that indigo farming was unprofitable and exploitative for peasants. The riots were told they could stop growing indigo in the future. As a result, indigo production collapsed in Bengal, but planters moved to Bihar. Later, when synthetic dyes were discovered, indigo became less valuable. However, this exploitation didn't end, and in 1917, the Mahatma Gandhi visited Champaran. He saw the same operation. That visit became the start of Champaran movement in India's first major peasant struggle under Gandhi. And this chapter is a perfect example of how colonial economic policies drained India's wealth and reshaped its rural life. Something every UPS aspirant must deeply understand. So that's it for today's class. I will upload next unit in the coming days. Till then, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel.